What is up, everybody? Welcome to the God's Heart, Your Part podcast. I am so excited that you are tuning in. Thank you so much. A couple quick things before we get into it. First off, if there are any specific things you want to hear talked about on the podcast, would you let us know? Reach out to us on Instagram at God's Heart, Your Part podcast. If you'd also like access to exclusive content, we got that for you on our Patreon, so check that out. It'll be well worth your time. Without further ado, let's dive in and let's learn from today's episode together. Everybody, welcome back to the God's Heart, Your Part podcast, where we are all about equipping and inspiring next generation leaders to be all that they are called to be. I am honored today to have on an incredible leader, an awesome friend, and somebody who happens to be my sister-in-law, which is so cool. We've had many discussions over a long amount of time now, and they're always fruitful and so faith-filled. And so I'm excited for you guys to have the chance to just hear from her, glean the wisdom. And so would everybody help welcome Mikayla to the podcast? What's up, Mikayla? How are you?
Oh my gosh, I am great, Brandon. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. This is not your first rodeo with podcasts.
It is not.
As it turns out, you happen to have a podcast of your own. And what's it
Turns out I
called?
do.
What's it about?
Okay, so it is called Paradox in Perspective, and the whole idea around it is just me sharing revelations that the Lord has given me over the years, just that have genuinely changed my life and my way of thinking. So
Yeah.
I want to share them. I want to be obedient to what the Lord has given me, and I don't want to be stingy. I don't want to just hold on to it and be like, this is good.
Yeah.
I want to go and share it with others. So
Yeah.
that's what it's about.
So if you guys enjoy this episode and the wisdom, my goodness, go ahead and look that up. And there's a lot of episodes out there. And if you don't like this episode, then I guess don't. Completely up to you. But you will. It's going to be great. Today, we're going to dive into what does it look like to walk out and really live your faith. So step one is really, how do you hear from the Lord? But then also, how do you actively have the faith to say, okay, I've heard from God. Now I live this out. And it's really something that I see in your life time and time again, whether it's leading a ministry, leading people, moving states. You are not afraid to take God at his word and take steps of faith. So my first question for you, Mikayla, would just be this. How do you hear from God, and what's that look like? What's it look like, and what's it mean to be like, oh, I heard from God in your life?
Yeah. Oh gosh. So this has definitely developed, I feel like, over the past few years.
Yeah.
I think it definitely just started off as just recognizing that my thoughts weren't my own. That there was just something deeper, a deeper level of wisdom that I was like, that's not from me. So that's when I actually started writing down revelations. It was because I felt like I was just understanding it differently, and I knew that it was from the Lord, and it wasn't like an audible voice, but I was like, there's just this deeper level of understanding. So it started as that, and then over the years, the Lord has really spoken to me through repetition. He will repeat things to me, and I started this motto where I was like, if I hear something once, okay. If I hear it a second time, I'm kind of okay. And if I hear it a third time, I write it down, because I'm like, that's not a coincidence to me.
Yeah.
So it was through repetition. There were several things that he spoke to me through repetition. And then it started to be whispers that were not from me and not my own thoughts, and just weird things in the sense of oh, that's never something I've thought about. So it's I can't throw it away. I can't just be oh, just my own mind. I just knew it wasn't.
Yeah.
So we developed that, and him just speaking in whispers. And then he still speaks to me in whispers. Recently, it's been dreams. This past year, that's been new for me, which has been a wild ride. And I'm still trying to discern all of that. But this past year, he started giving me prophetic dreams. So yeah, it's really, I don't think it just looks like one thing. And I don't think it's oh, well, the Lord only speaks to you one way for the rest of your life. So it's not okay, well, we've gone through this gradual level of different ways he's been speaking, but then we'll finally reach one thing. I think all of creation, he speaks through all of creation. So I'm it makes sense that he speaks through many different avenues. So I think he will continue to do that. So
that's really great. You said at the beginning, you write down the revelation. Explain why.
Mainly because I don't know. I think everybody should, but me personally, I have so many thoughts running through my mind all
Sure.
the time
Sure.
that I'm like, if I do not write this down, I will forget. I'm constantly, my mind is constantly going,
Yeah.
which I thought was normal for the longest time for everyone until I talked to some friends and they were like, no, like there's some times where there's just like nothing going on in my mind. I'm like, that is wild to me.
I also
So
don't
I
get
know,
that.
oh, right.
Yeah.
I'm like, there's not like a constant dialogue literally all the time. Weird. Anyway,
You don't wake up
um,
in the middle of the night with just random thoughts like, who
right,
made
right.
toothpaste? Like, you know.
Who did? I don't
Who
know, but I'll
did?
spiral about it. So
Exactly.
right.
No, yeah.
So so yeah, toothpaste. What were we talking
Oh
about?
no.
See,
So
okay,
you have
gotcha,
to
gotcha,
write
gotcha.
it.
So
Yeah,
so many
yeah,
thoughts. Yes, write it down. See, okay. So if I don't write it down, I will forget.
yeah.
So that, and also honestly is proof, because sometimes I'll be like, I know the Lord said this to me, but how exactly did he say it? And I think how the Lord says things sometimes is so, he says it so specifically for a reason.
Wow.
So I'm like, if he says something to me, like if he gave me a dream like 2 nights ago and I don't write it down, they'll be like, wait, did he say it like this or did he say it like this? And it's like,
Hmm.
no, fresh off of that, fresh off of when he said it, I
Yeah.
want to write it down so I know exactly what he said, so the enemy can't come in and try to be like, well, no, he
Hmm.
actually said this and meant this by it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know there's a verse, I don't know where it's at, but it says like,
Yeah.
write the vision down, make it
Mhm.
plain.
Mhm.
So I just
Yeah.
write it
Where is
down.
that?
I get it. I don't know.
Oh, I know. I know. It is a
Oh,
verse. It is a verse.
it is a verse.
It's
You should definitely go look it
somewhere.
up on the Bible app.
That's right.
But yeah, so that's why I do it. It's just to kind of remember.
I love that so much. You said, God's starting to speak to you in whispers. Now, you're not necessarily
Mhm.
talking all the time like these audible voices.
Mm-mm.
Explain
No.
what you mean by that. Is it an impression? Is it a thought that you're discerning? Is it both of those? Like, what do you mean by that?
Yeah. It's definitely not like an audible voice like I'm hearing.
Yeah.
It's not like a quiet whisper, but it's like a quiet, almost like gentle thought is the best way I could like
Mm.
put it, or like
Mm-hmm.
impression on my heart.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one that most of the time, I mean, there's recently the Lord said some like pretty clear things to me,
Sure.
but a lot of the times it's like this quiet whisper where it makes me be like, wait a minute, was that me? Or, like,
Mm.
did I hear that? Like, it kind
Yeah.
of makes me question a little bit, and
Yeah.
I have to lean into it. So it's most of the time it's not like a, hey, like I told you this, like, you know, for sure. It's like a, wait, did I hear that right? And
Yeah.
it's a lot of the time it's just like, did I? And it is a question. And I'll be so
Yeah.
honest. I think so many times people will be like, well, I don't know if I hear from the Lord. And it's like, you probably do, but maybe you're just throwing it away too early, or like
Hmm.
dismissing it as like, oh, well, that couldn't have been me. Or I thought when he was going to speak to me, it was going to sound like this, or it was going to be louder. I was going to be sure. I think most of the time when the Lord speaks to you, you aren't really sure of, is it him? Is it not him? But I think
Yeah.
that's why he develops discernment. And then I think it's also, I think he does it for such a reason, because then I have to go
Yeah.
back to him and be like, are you sure you said that? I'm like, was that
Yeah.
you?
Yeah.
So yeah.
It almost breeds like this intimacy with him, because it's like you
Mhm.
have to come back to him. That was going to be my next question for you, really, was okay, if we define it as kind of like I have a thought or an impression and it's not like thus says the Lord,
Mhm.
how do you go along that discernment journey?
Yeah.
And maybe you're still figuring that out too, right? Like, I don't know that any of us ever are like, here's the 3-step method to how to
Right.
confirm the voice of God. But what's that journey look like for you, and where are you at with that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, oh gosh. So,
Skip? No, I'm kidding.
no, no. He, there's certain things that he said to me that I just like knew, but a lot of times how I discern it is, was this something I was already thinking about, or was this so out of the blue? And most of the time when the Lord speaks to me, it's something that like I wasn't thinking about. Like, it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't my own agenda. It wasn't my own will that I was trying to chase after, and he like gave me the green light. It was like
Mm-hmm.
something that I've really never thought of. I've really never like contemplated, or like probably wouldn't have picked for myself. And it makes
Yeah.
me be like, okay, well, because I know this wasn't something internally that I had been thinking about, my thoughts haven't been like dwelling on it, this has to be from him.
Yeah.
And yes, again, there's more of that to take into discernment, and more it's a lot of prayer. It's honestly a lot of prayer, and
Yeah.
sitting down and being
Yeah.
like, hey Lord, like, you know my heart. If
Mm-hmm.
this isn't from you, like, I don't really want to dwell on it. It's not really worth my time. It's not really worth the energy. Like, if this isn't from you,
Yeah.
just like let it pass.
Yeah.
But I'll be so honest all the time. If I'm like, I don't know if this was him, I'll be like, Lord, if this is from you, then like keep it in my mind. Like let me not forget about it. Like let it be so loud. Like let it linger in my mind.
Yeah.
And he does. And it is really hard sometimes to be like, is this the Lord, or is this my own
Yeah.
thoughts that I'm like thinking of? And it's like I'm asking him to get rid of them, but like is he? And that's a current thing that I'm in, and there's certain things where I'm like, I don't understand because that doesn't make sense to me. And
Yeah. Yeah.
it's a lot of trying to like be like, I don't know, Lord, but my
Yeah.
heart is pure. My heart is that I don't want to, especially if it's a word for someone else, I'm like, I don't want to say anything that's going to lead them astray.
Yeah.
So like if that's not you, I don't want to say it. Something that a friend told me the one time was like, when the Lord was giving her words for other people and she was very unsure, she was like, Lord, don't let my feet move if it's not you. So I started to pray that, and I would be like, okay, Lord, like I feel like I got this like word or impression for somebody else, but like if this was just something that I kind of mustered up in my own thoughts, do not let my feet move, because I don't want to go over and be like, hey, the Lord told me this.
Good. Yeah.
If it's not from you. So I'm like, Lord, don't let my feet move.
Yeah.
And every single time he moves my feet. So I'm like, okay, got it.
Yeah.
And I think it's also just the more you operate out of it, a lot of times I just have to take a step of uncomfortability.
Yeah.
Be like, you know what? I am not 100% sure that the Lord gave me this word, but I have to step out in faith, and I have to like go say it anyway. And that's happened a lot of times when I've gotten words for other people. I've been like, Lord, I feel like I heard this from you for that person. I'm not 100% sure. Don't let my feet move if it's not you. I'm going to step out anyway. If it's not you, stop me. Like I am submitted to your authority and to like your leadership. So like stop me. And I think again, like the Lord knows our heart.
Yeah.
He knows that we're not like, and I do think some people will be like, hey, I have a word from you, and it's like not actually like from the Lord.
You're like, what
But I think,
Jesus were you talking to?
right. But I think that if we're like genuinely seeking the Lord,
Yeah.
he knows that, and he
Yeah.
knows that like, hey, I'm not gonna, you're submitted to me, your mind is submitted to me, like I'm not gonna let you step out if that like wasn't me. So yeah, a lot of times it's going off of like a maybe though, like, hey, I think I heard this, and I preface that when I tell people, I'm like, hey, you know what, I feel like the Lord gave me this. If you don't think that this is applicable, I'm like, you could either throw it away, or you should maybe like put it away for a different day. Like, because I've had leaders who have given words to me, and in the moment I'm like, this makes no sense to me. And then years later I'm like, oh my gosh, like
there
that's
it
what that
is.
meant.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm like, oh yeah, that is true. So a lot of it's just stepping out in faith and being like, hey, I think this is from you. And sometimes people are like, yeah, that's spot on.
Yeah.
And then there's other times where I don't get a response. I feel like a couple months ago, I got something so specific for this one girl, and I was like, Lord, I don't know. Like, that's kind of wild. Like, that's kind of crazy. And I just sent her a voice memo. I was like, hey, like, I really feel like this is for you. And I gave it to her, and she never responded. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. But the Lord knows my heart. So,
right.
Yeah.
No, that's really good. I think a couple thoughts, and you tell me if you agree, disagree. I think for anyone listening, that can sound so intimidating and daunting too, to be like, oh my gosh, I don't know how to do any of that. I would just say start small, right?
Yeah.
And start with the like, how do you get to know the voice of God? Like getting to know any other voice. And and actually I think the episode before your episode is going to be Pastor David, who I talked with, and he basically said that's why you need to always know God's word to take it back to that as kind of the grounding, the source. And so for me, like whenever I first started to be like, is that God's voice? It would be a lot of times it's like, okay, wait, I feel God's prompting to do something or say something. Well, clearly that's in God's word, and that's not something that was just naturally me. So like, I think that's the voice of God. And then you become more and more familiar with it. And then before you know it, you're seeing and you're experiencing more and more kind of wild or, maybe not as clear things, but you're like, oh, I know the voice, so I trust it. And then confirmation's good too. So those are a couple of thoughts as you were talking where I was like, okay, that's really good.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And again, I think like the more that you walk in it and like start taking those steps, I think the Lord honors it. He's like, okay, like I see you, like you're I'm prompting you and you're moving. And honestly, it was like about a year ago, I felt the Lord was giving me so many words. And then I started to question every single one of them. I was like, I don't know if this is from you. And then I went through a season where I felt like I wasn't speaking at all. And then it opened my eyes to like, oh, yeah, that was the Lord. And I'm honestly so glad, because while I was going through that, I was like, why isn't the Lord speaking to me anymore? Like, did I do something wrong? Is he mad at me?
Yeah.
But I think it was honestly to show me like, hey, you were questioning if you heard me. And now that I'm, not saying all these words to you or like as often, like now you can go back and recognize that like back then I was speaking to you. And I'm like, oh yeah, like you're right. Like that's what that feels like, or like that's what that prompting feels like. So
that's really good. Okay, so if you hear from the Lord and you feel like you do your due diligence and you're like, okay, this is from God and this is something, but that thing that God tells you doesn't make sense to you, how do you walk in faith in that despite all your we come up with a million excuses for reasons why not to, right? And some of them make very good sense. Like, it's not always like, making excuses that are bad. It's like, no, they're logical. They make sense. But from your experience, from your life, how do you do that? How do you, in the face of the excuses or the reasons why not to, how do you choose to walk in faith instead?
Yeah. I think it all roots from this place of like, whatever he speaks is not void. So like there's a lot of things that he's spoken, and there's some of them that I've now been on the other side. I've been like, okay, I feel like the Lord said this and I moved and I acted out of that. And then there's things that the Lord has said to me that I'm still like, I don't understand, but I know you said it.
Yeah.
So like, I don't know what's going to happen with that, but because I know that everything you speak has purpose, I'm going to say, it has no other option than to come to pass.
Yeah.
So when it came to me moving to Texas, that made no sense to me. I heard the Lord whisper to me Texas, and I was like, no, thank you. That's not my plan.
Yeah.
No thanks. Let me throw that away. And then I couldn't, because my mind just kept like thinking about it and thinking about it.
Yeah.
And it like wouldn't leave my mind. So I was like, okay, Lord, like, what are you doing here?
Yeah.
Like, what do you want me to do? Like, okay, fine. Like, Texas, like, I'll think about it. Like, what do you want me to do here? And then I moved, and even though I didn't know, I was like, I don't know why. The Lord didn't say, hey, Mikayla, go move to Texas because you need to do this. You need to work here. You need to meet this person. He didn't say any of that. All he said was Texas. And I said, okay. And I questioned it. I questioned it a lot because that was not what I wanted.
Yeah.
But I knew more than anything that I wanted, I just wanted to be obedient to him.
Yeah.
So I was like, all right, like, fine, I'll go. And so I went, and I said to the Lord too, I was like, listen, if this really is you, you're going to have to make it work. Like, I did kind of test the Lord a little bit. I don't know if I recommend that, but I did a little bit, because I was like, you know what? I was like, Lord, if you really said Texas, I was like, you're going to have to make like everything, like job, apartment, like everything work.
Yeah.
In a month, literally within a month, I was moved down there. So anyway,
my gosh. Yeah.
When the Lord says something though, like, he will make it happen.
That's
like,
a
he
word.
will fund like his words. Yes.
Yeah.
So I went down there still confused as ever. I was like, I don't know why I'm here, but I'm confused about why, but I know for sure you said it.
Yeah.
So I moved there, and I moved back. Now, obviously, I'm in Pittsburgh now, and I still don't know why. I don't 100% know why the Lord moved me there. I have some ideas. I'm like, it could be because of that person I met, or that person, or because I got to experience this or that. I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah.
And I might not know until the other side of heaven. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
But I know that he said to move. So I did.
Yeah.
And then there was like recently he's been giving me some dreams that I'm like, okay, I know it's from you.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what it means. Like, I don't know what you want me to do with it. So there is all this confusion. And I'm like, I don't know what the action is. Is the action pray for this? Is the action go? Is the action like keep my eyes peeled? I don't know. So it's just kind of like the posture I've taken is just keeping my eyes open and my ears open to be like, all right, I know you said this. I don't know what that means. What do you got for me? And whenever he needs to, he'll let me know. He will let me know. So it's just kind of waiting and keeping my ears open to whatever it is, especially if it's, I think especially to the things where I'm like, that doesn't make sense, or like I wouldn't have wanted that. When I feel those promptings, or like, hey, it might be because of this, I lean into that even more, because I'm like, okay, well, that's not my agenda, it's yours. So
Wow, that's a great word. While you're talking, I think there are lots of cases, and I think even if you read through the Bible, I'm like, man, we look back at these people like, oh, they had it all together, and I'm sure they knew. But I'm like, I look at so many stories, and I'm like, they didn't even know how half the things were going to end, and they probably didn't understand
Mhm.
half of why God. Like, even look at Abraham and Isaac, right?
Yeah.
God telling Abraham to go sacrifice Isaac, not understanding that the picture is foreshadowing the Savior that's going to come
Right.
thousands of years later, right? Like, there's so many things that in the moment God tells you, hey, go and do this. And of course, God was merciful. He spared Isaac, all that. But like,
Yeah.
he says, go and do this. We don't always understand why, but we don't need to trust
Mm-mm.
the who, right? We don't need the
So
why if
true.
we know the who. And so if we know who God is, we know who Jesus is, we can keep walking anyway, and it won't always make sense. And sometimes it's not our dream. It's not what we
So true.
desire or long for. Um, one of the guests on here, Wade Joy, which I'm sure you
Mhm.
listened to that episode. I'm just
Mhm.
positive of it. But he wrote this book called "This Dream Is Not for You," and
Mm.
the entire idea is David, whenever he wants to build to God the tabernacle, I think it was,
Mm.
and God tells him, "Hey, I'm not gonna have you do that, but rather your
Yep.
son." Doesn't make any
Mhm.
sense. He didn't understand why, but he trusted God enough to keep walking with him, understanding, okay, God spoke it. I'll keep working on what I'm supposed to work on and not worry about what I'm not supposed to. So I don't know. Just while
Yep.
you were saying all that, that just kind of came to my mind, and I was like, that's the battle of faith. Is like, I don't get it, but I'm gonna go. You know?
It really is. And I think a lot of times we desire prophecy without faith, or we desire to hear things from the Lord, but we don't really want the faith aspect of it. And I think that's most of the time the Lord doesn't give a why. He just will
Mm-hmm.
tell you
Mm-hmm.
like what it is, and he won't give you a why, because
Yeah.
if he tells you that, you don't really need him. If he tells you like, "Hey,
Yeah.
go do this because
Yeah.
of this," then you can go solo. But if he says, "Hey, go do this," and I'm like, "Okay,
It's really good.
but why? Like, what am I doing here?" It's like, well, then I need to continue to seek him. I need to continue to seek his leadership and his
Yeah.
wisdom. And I need to continue to pray for discernment and wisdom. Like, I
Yeah.
need that to keep developing. And
Yeah.
it's like, if he just tells me why, I could go out of my own strength. But it's like, but then what is that worth if I'm going out of my own strength anyway? So I think
Yeah.
that's so important, that like faith and like prophetic words, like they cannot be separate. Like, you have to put faith behind that to be like, all right, I don't know why, but I'm gonna like step out in faith anyway, and just like,
Yeah.
you said it, like, all right, I'll do it.
Yeah. That's so good.
Mm.
Um, let's pivot the convo a little bit. Okay, so this
Okay.
has all been very, I think this has been so valuable for like personally hearing from God, personally walking in faith. Let's talk about how important this idea of hearing from God and activating your faith to what you hear from God is within the
Mhm.
context of ministry and influencing others. Like, how important is it to live a life that's hearing from Him, being led by Him, and walking with Him if you're going to lead a ministry? Because really, the goal of the podcast is towards those young, emerging leaders who are like, okay, how can I be faithful with the calling God's given me? So, what would you say? How important is that as a leader and as a ministry leader?
Yeah, I mean, if you're leading any ministry, it's really not yours. It's his.
Hmm.
If you're
I'll
leading
say it
youth, if you're
again.
leading
Say it
kids,
again.
if you're leading like young adults, that's not your ministry. That's his. It's his
Yeah.
kids.
Yeah.
That's his church. If
Yeah.
you're a worship leader and like you're leading, those are his kids. Like, it's not for you. So it's like and we say all the time, like, Lord, do whatever you want, but then we go in with our agenda, and it's like, okay, yes, like, I do believe that there is things that the Lord can place inside of you, and there's different, like, there's a reason why he
Yeah.
chose you to be in that role. But I think to go and take that on without consulting him and being like, hey, Lord, like, and without being open to what he wants to do, it becomes about us.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, what I want to do as a leader, what I want to do for my ministry. But it's like, it's really like, it's not about us. Like,
Yeah.
it's his
Yeah.
kids. So if he wants to pivot how that ministry looks like, then that's what he wants to do. And I owe it to him to be obedient, even if it's like, okay,
Hmm.
well, I wouldn't have chose that, or like, I don't really know if like I would have gone that direction. if that's the way it's going and that's how he sees best fit, like, okay, let me do it. Because at the end of the day, he knows who belongs in that ministry. Like, he knows who is walking in. So for me, like, I
Yeah.
lead young adult ministry. I, obviously I love people. I love making friends, but it is so impossible for me to deeply know each and every person.
Right.
But he created them. Like, he
Yeah.
knows everything about them. So
Yeah.
more than I know about the people walking into the building, he knows. Like, he knows everything about them. So it's like, if he's like, hey, you know what, Mikayla, like, I know the group you got coming in, like, they really need this. And I know this doesn't look like what you've been doing, but like, they really need this.
Yeah.
Okay, even if it's maybe not what I would have picked. All right, Lord, like, these are your kids, like, this is your ministry. So like, I'm going to pivot wherever you want, like, wherever you want to take it. I think as leaders, I think not always, but I think it's really easy to start leading and then kind of like think that we're leading the Lord, and we don't like blindly look at it that way. Like, we think like,
Cool.
well, like, I'm submitted to him, but it's like, but you actually, you aren't. And you're like, well, I'm leading his ministry, and it's like, no, he should be leading me. It's his ministry. You know what I
Wow.
mean? So I
Yeah.
think we have to like constantly go back to that. Be like, it's not like, yeah, maybe he's the one who gave me, like, I have the title of leader of this ministry, but at the end of the day, it's his, and
Yeah.
I'm still serving.
Wow.
I'm serving his children, and I'm serving him. So, yeah.
Whew, that's profound. That's a word. And that requires a lot of humility to say what you just said, and to actually live that out. Maybe not so much to say it, but to actually live it out. That takes some humility, to really submit yourself, which is really, I mean, what you're saying. Hearing from God. God is near to the humble, but he opposes the proud, right?
Yep.
And so, like, he wants to speak to a tender heart, and he wants to lead a humble leader who will say, all right, Lord, it's yours, not mine. And so, and honestly, I know this isn't the point of this, but I think that's why the Lord continues to bless your leadership and to build up the things that you're putting your hand to, because you do have a very open-handed approach and posture, and it's not about Mikayla, and it's not about your leaders who are under you. It's about him. And so I think that's really cool, because you're not just saying it, you're actually walking it out. And so for any young leader watching, again, go to Paradox and Perspective, her podcast, because she's a great leader to learn from, and who doesn't just talk the talk, but who actually walks it out in her life. So thank you for doing that. Is there any parting advice, words of wisdom that you would want to give to any young leader coming up? This can be related to our topic or completely not. This is a free-for-all section, if you have anything you want to say.
Yeah, I think a lot of us desire to like hear from the Lord. And I remember like growing up, I would hear people be like, I heard this from the Lord, and I'd be like, that's crazy, like, I want that, but like, that's just like, he doesn't. He does that for some people, but like not everybody gets that, and that's like okay. But like, no, he desires to like speak to all of us. Like, he is speaking to all of us, and like he wants you to acknowledge that. He wants you to acknowledge his voice. So it's like, if you think that like I don't hear from the Lord, or like he doesn't talk to me, like he's talking. But with that, I would say I don't think I actually started to like really recognize and like hear from the Lord until he humbled me to listen to other people. And I think it's like, that's kind of what you have to start doing. If you're like, I don't know, I don't feel like, I feel like I don't hear from the Lord.
Yeah.
Okay, but it might not be like you're not hearing this like big loud like word, or even like the whisper or the heart impression, but are you listening to other people? Are you being compassionate? Are you being empathetic? Or are you so stuck in like, well, this is like my way, and like I don't agree with you, so I'm like refusing to listen to you. And I definitely walked through that, where I was so prideful in my own opinion, and I refused to like listen to other people who didn't agree with me. And while that was happening, I really can't look back and be like, that's when the Lord was speaking to me. Like, I don't think he was, because I was so caught up in my own thoughts that I was like refusing to be humble. And I think he speaks to a humble heart. So if you're like, I like want to hear from the Lord, like start listening to other people. And also when it comes to like prophetic words. Somebody said, I found this Instagram clip years ago, and
Yeah.
it really marked me.
Yeah.
And they were like, if you're desiring the gift of prophecy, like, great, that's amazing. Like, he tells us to desire that, but start encouraging people. Because if you're like, well, I feel like I don't have, like, the Lord didn't give me like a crazy word, start encouraging people. Like, if you see somebody on the side of the street and you're like, I really like their smile, I really like, like how outgoing they are, tell them. Because
Yeah.
it's like, when you're obedient with that, he'll give you more, and then he'll open your eyes into the supernatural to be like, hey, I know, because, like, in the past, like, you would see these things, like these outward things, but like, now I've given you new eyes to see, like, supernaturally, like, this is for them and they need this specific encouragement. So you feel like if you really desire that gift of prophecy and hearing from the Lord, start just by encouraging people based off of what you see. You don't need to wait for him to like speak this crazy thing. Just start speaking like life over people and watch, because he'll honor that.
Yeah.
So
Come on.
that's what I would give.
That's so good. Thanks, Mikayla. Rapid fire, couple quick fun questions. Didn't send these to you. Do you like to read?
You do not? Okay, so I haven't, but until this past year, so I would say now I like to read. I like self-help books. I've recently been reading The Last Supper on the Moon by Levi Lusko, and it's phenomenal.
Okay, good. Well, my next question was going to be book recommendation, but there you go.
There you go.
What is Mikayla's favorite TV show? All time.
New Girl.
Oh, not familiar. What is Mikayla's favorite? Yeah, I'm not familiar. Should I be?
Yeah. I'm pretty sure Kendall's seen it.
You, Mika, we can all do New Girl night. How about that?
Okay. There's a lot of seasons, but yeah, we'll start.
Good. Oh, what's Mikayla's favorite movie? Everyone wants to know. Flooding my inbox asking me this. What's Mikayla's favorite movie?
Okay, I'm a big Star Wars fan.
Oh.
Today's actually May the 4th. Anyways,
thank you guys so much for tuning in to today's episode.
Oh, what a perfect way to ask. Anyway, I am a big Star Wars fan, and I think my favorite movie is Attack of the Clones.
Love it. Go-to snack.
Ooh, I actually don't know. Recently, it's been grapes.
Oh, okay. Interesting answers.
I don't
That's healthy,
know
though.
if that's a good answer, but that's my current answer.
That is a healthy, good answer that we will accept.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Hey, you are so great. Thank you so much for hanging out today, for sharing all of this wisdom. For everybody listening, go ahead and check out the Paradox and Perspective podcast. It will be re-releasing episodes. Oh my gosh, my earbud just fell out. It will be re-releasing episodes that are going to be amazing. And so be sure to head over there, subscribe, follow it, and follow along for more. Mikayla, thank you so much. You're awesome.
Yes. Thank you, Brandon. I'm honored to be here.
Yes. All right, everybody. Love you so much. Until next time. Peace.